Reverend Canon Chris Russell, thank you so much for flying across the pond and joining us here at the Yale Youth Ministry Institute for the lecture you and David Ford will be sharing on praise. I looked at your business card and your resume and your website, and I couldn't help but notice right there, advisor to the Archbishop of Canterbury on evangelism and witness. So of course I'd like to start with the question of evangelism. It's so common in our American youth ministries for some to think, I'm at the church, I send out a flyer, I put a notice in the church bulletin, they'll come. But obviously you must have a different understanding of the importance of evangelism and where you start.
Yeah. Thanks, Skip, and thanks so much for having me. It's just a great gift to be here. We're delighted to be here. The question of how we do evangelism and why we do evangelism is a critical one for us, I reckon. Firstly, I think it's worth just having a bit of a conversation about what evangelism is. Because in the UK, when Archbishop Justin said he had three priorities, and the first was prayer and the renewal of religious life, and the second was reconciliation, and the third was evangelism, there was all sorts. Some people were cheering and high-fiving, and other people were like, oh goodness, here we are again, the E word. Because evangelism has got itself a bad name in the UK. And some people see it simply as a way to keep the church going. It's just a survival technique. Now, other people think it's a church growth strategy. Other people think it's just the preserve of one of the church traditions. That you'll just do that if you're an evangelical, if you're more of a formal Anglo-Catholic, we won't do it. So we've tried to be clear about what evangelism is and why evangelism. Evangelism, the commitment to evangelism is because of the commitment to Jesus Christ. This isn't something we do because we're scared stiff about the future, that we're going to die, that everything's going absolutely badly, and so we've got to do something to get more people in. That's not the driver in evangelism. The driver in evangelism is the love of Jesus Christ, and we desperately want every single person to hear for themselves the compelling love of Jesus Christ, so they can respond and so that they can live their life for Jesus Christ, because the best decision anyone can possibly make in their life is to be a follower of Jesus. And so that's the commitment to evangelism. Now, I think evangelism also requires people hearing news that they haven't heard before, and that's good news. But the question of how they hear that news, of how people who don't have any contact with Christian faith hear the message of Jesus, that they can respond to it, is a massive question. Now, there are in the UK different models of this, and there, in any evangelism, there's no just add boiling water solution. There's no magic, just do this and this will happen. But there is that model, which I would call an attractional model of, look, let's just have great big screens for young people. Let's have thumping music. Let's go down the relevancy line, and then people will come in. I'm not persuaded by that at all. I'm not persuaded by that, not simply because that doesn't work, because that doesn't seem to me to be the Christian way. So I work on a model of what I'd say was outside in, that those of us who feel compelled to offer young people this opportunity to hear the good news of Jesus and to respond to it, we can't just sit in our church buildings, in our programs, and expect young people to beat their path to their door. We must go and make relationships with these young people. Now, how we do that is a number one question. So for me, that dovetails with my other role. So I've been vicar of St. Laurence Reading for 17 years. And our mandate as a church is to work with non-church young people. And so we had this huge challenge when we started, is how do we go about meeting young people who haven't got any contact with church? Relationships are key. We all know that. But how do we go about establishing those relationships? So I remember we started, a great friend called Pete Ward, who is an encyclopedic knowledge about, he's a professor now in Durham on youth ministry. He's served the church in the UK and internationally, amazingly, on youth ministry. And I said to him, look, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, Pete. I'm going to write to all the schools. So in the UK, we have a different relationship, and we can do different things in schools than I know you can do over here. So I said, I've written to all the schools. I'm going to write to all the schools. I'm going to offer to do assemblies every day in the UK every school that is paid for by the state is supposed to have an act of worship that is, quote, of a predominantly Christian nature. Now, the fact that that doesn't happen every day, and in some schools it doesn't even happen once a month, is beside the point. But I said, listen, I'll write to the schools and I say, I'll come and do your assemblies for you. I'll come and do RE lessons for you. And I run this past Pete, and Pete said, that's a terrible idea. It's disastrous. You'll just become a Christian educator. Christian education is really, really important, and if that's your vocation, then great. But that's not going to get you to make relationships with young people. That's just going to get 800 young people to know who you are. But that's not going to do anything more. He said, we've got to find the place that is the place that God is giving us where we can take these relationships and we can invest in these relationships. He said, so let's do this. Let's pray. Now, obviously, I should have thought of that before. But he said, let's pray that God opens up for us a gold seam. And so we prayed and prayed and prayed. And there was one school where somebody who'd been doing some youth counselling and some after-school clubs once a month said, oh, I'm leaving this, could you take it on? So we said, of course we can take it on. So we took it on. And that school is still, after 17 years, the most fruitful place of all of our relationships. And so that reminds me of this, that in this work, God has started it. He's already doing things. He's already opening things up. And so for the starter with evangelism isn't us. We don't arrive somewhere and say, right, we're bringing God into this situation, that God's already at work. And so I think for us, a huge thing is discerning where the Spirit's leading us. And so we went for this gold seam, and we've mined that gold seam for everything that we did.